we get into our next topic, which is whether stop and search should be increased to tackle knife crime. 020 7862 2222 is the number. And this is after the Huntingdon train attack on Saturday evening. 32-year-old suspect Anthony Williams appeared in court yesterday on a number of serious charges, including 10 counts of attempted murder. He also faced further charges of attempted murder and possessing a blade in a separate incident at Pontoon Dock, a Docklands Light Railway station in East London early on Saturday morning. Police are also investigating 3 other incidents in Peterborough to see whether they are potentially connected to the Huntingdon train attack, including one, I'll show you a photo here on the front page of The Guardian, in which a man was seen holding a knife here in a barber's shop. So let us have a closer look at the incidents and the timeline of what went on, because it's a little bit confusing, this, because it starts here in Peterborough, this timeline. By the way, we haven't yet established that it's all done by the same person. We should make that clear. So you have Friday night, 7:10, a 14-year-old boy is stabbed in Peterborough city centre. He had minor injuries and was later discharged from hospital. Very soon after that, the barbershop incident. And then the next thing that happens, this person, if it is the same person, it may not be, has arrived in London, and early on Saturday morning, 12:45 a.m., a male victim is stabbed at Pontoon Dock in East London. So that happens in London. And then the suspect arrives back up here. So they somehow got back up to Peterborough, it seems. Saturday, firstly, they board an LNER train. No, sorry, first, beg your pardon. Number 4 here, see how confusing this is. They're seen outside the same barber shop that they were in here. That's on Saturday morning. We then go to Saturday evening and they board the train. And then we have the situation around Huntingdon that we know so much about. So it's an up and down journey. Peterborough, London, Peterborough, it seems. And we can't talk much more about all the details because court cases are pending. But when you look at the Huntingdon incident yesterday, the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood said knife crime is too high and more must be done.
I know that ideas have already been suggested about how policing should change in response to this event. Once the facts are known, we must examine what more might have been done to stop this horrific attack from ever occurring, and whether there are measures that we must now take to better protect the public on our streets and on our trains.
Her Tory counterpart, Chris Philps, suggested that one potential change would be to dramatically increase the use of stop and search, despite concerns it disproportionately targets minorities. What do you think of that, Yasmin?
Well, I mean, it's always this fallback position, isn't it? Let's bring back stop and search. I think we could, we do need to remember the history of that and how it has always disproportionately affected black people, black men in particular. But at the same time, there is, I read somewhere a couple of weeks ago that children as young as 4 have turned up in school with knives.
Oh, amazing.
I mean, I was so shocked by that. So I think what we need to do is we will have to have train stations have the same cameras and security that airports have, schools do. I would be happier with that than an increase in stop and search.
Charlie.
I couldn't disagree more, Yasmin, I'm sorry to say. It's not about bringing it back. It already exists, stop and search. And you need to increase it because in 2024, the number of stop and searches were down compared to 2023. So there is, I think, when you see the incidents like you've just been talking about, you need to see an increase in stop and search, because the one thing that I do not want to see is this country living in a fear of itself, a shadow of itself, where every time you have to go to a school, you have to go through a metal sort of detector. Every time you go to a train station, where does it end? Supermarkets, football stadiums? I know you have to be searched anyway in big stadiums, but everywhere you go, it seems, as an innocent person, of which the overwhelming majority of people will be in this country, have to face some sort of check or identity issue or search. That is not right.
But
I think you need to target...
Police officers are told, that yes. The argument against it seems to be that when police officers are allowed to search people they're suspicious of, they tend to go for others, often people who are ethnically different from themselves. Police officers tend to be white. Therefore, they search black people, and therefore you end up with what you had in, let's say, Brixton in the 80s, where you had a famous report, Scarman report, who said, you've been searching people who've done nothing wrong,
right,
and you've really upset them.
And I don't disagree, but that is the 1970s, 80s. This is now 2025. And I think you address that by making sure that you have whether it's a metropolitan police force or any other police force that is diverse, that has the people that are working in it that feel able to engage with communities, first of all, so have a bit more community policing, have a bit more intelligence. But stop and search is vital to removing knives off the streets, but it has to be obviously conducted when it's well targeted, with intelligence, and which gets knives off the street. Otherwise, what you do is what we were just saying, which I totally disagree with. I wouldn't have been allowed into this studio. I probably wouldn't have been allowed into
because you haven't got a knife in your pocket.
No, but under what everyone else is saying, I would have had to gone through some sort of, a metal detector before coming in.
So what? If you don't have a knife in your pocket, you come through.
It just takes time. It's inconvenient. That's his point. So it takes forever.
Exactly. And I shouldn't have to go through all of those checkpoints. Nobody should. But if I'm suspected of having a knife, of course I'd want the police to come up to me and say, turn out your pockets.
But Yasmin, your concern is still, even in 2025, that you will end up with largely white officers searching mainly black men.
We heard those police officers in the WhatsApp groups. We have seen evidence of horrible sexism and racism within the Met. Are we saying that that's okay, that these guys who may be completely innocent, these police officers are going to treat them fairly because it's 2025?
Well, currently, black men are 3.7 times more likely to be stopped and searched than white men. I just throw that in. Neville in Manchester, hello.
Hello, good morning again, panel. Yasmin, you had me up until the knife arch thing. I'd just like to ask every single one of you, outside of a kitchen, outside of your home kitchen or outside of your workplace, is there a need for you to carry a knife?
No. We all agree no.
Right. So why do we not change the law so that anybody found in possession, don't even have to be doing anything.
Oh yeah, that's the law already. You're not allowed to. There's a guy who had a knife in his briefcase that was searched in the centre of London. He said, "Well, I'm allowed," but carrying an offensive weapon is an offence already.
It is, but what we need to do is change that law so that you can face up to until you can face up to a life sentence just for being in possession. It's not going to change, is it? When you know that you could go to jail for 10 years just being in possession, then you'll see things change.
So let's say I go to the supermarket, I need a knife for my kitchen, I buy it and I'm stopped on the way home.
Right. You keep the receipt. With you. It's been checked by two members of staff. You keep the receipt with you. It's been checked by two members of staff, and then you keep that receipt. You go straight home with it, and it goes in your kitchen. If you're found within 4 hours of having that blade with you, and you've not gone home with it, boom, there's your arrest.
And you're a youth worker, Neville, so you see a lot of young people carrying knives.
Look, from the late 90s, there's kids I know on my estate here in Moss Side that routinely hide them in different places because they can see the police coming onto the estate. They know when they're going to be going out doing stuff, and they know how to stop and search. Only results in 6% of the cases nationally. Does it result in one find? And that's atrocious. So whether it was back in the 80s or today, stop and search has never worked and it never will.
OK, Neville, thank you so much for calling in. That is interesting. Mind you, 6% sounds high to me. I mean, that's, that's a substantial fine. If you search 100 people, you find 6 knives. Tony in Hampshire, hi.
Yeah, hi.
Hey, all right.
This is a complicated one. I am a black man, and black and brown people want to see these crimes reduced or completely eliminated. But I think it's very easy for the average, Caucasian, Brit, or white person to be able to say, let's just go ahead and increase stop and search. The issue I think needs to be looked at. I mean, the guy that hasn't been spoken about a lot during that happened at Huntingdon, the guy that turned out to be innocent, he would have had trauma in the same way as everyone else that was running away.
Yeah, it's a very interesting, you're right, it's a very interesting angle. And I don't know, I'd love to know more about that gentleman, because it sounds as if he was pointed out by a passenger who thought that he was part of the same incident and he wasn't. And it's a very good point, that, Tony.
Well, yeah, I mean, the guy was panicking, same as everyone else. I think the same happened to, was it John Menendez, the Brazilian guy that was
John
shot.
Charles
Exactly.
Menendez, yeah.
Yes,
But that was a
shot.
complete police disaster, yeah.
Yeah, and his reaction was the same as any white person, any person. And, you know, I've got a 19-year-old, you know, son, and black. And, you know, I worry about, you know, he goes to London. We don't live in London, but, you know, you just worry about, you know, what would they do? Because there's no education, there's no clear messaging from the police to say, right, this is what you should do if you are called up in a situation like that. There needs to be very clear and firm education workshops to show that we can show our black and brown kids and everyone, you know, how to respond, because the natural instinct is the same for a black person, a white person, Chinese person, whatever, but there's a high risk that, you know, as nearly happened with this other guy, he could have been shot.
Okay.
So, and I know also, you know, that there's one thing I would say, that if the police want to go ahead and use these measures, they need to sort their act out, because it's very easy for them to say the public are, you know, are against them in terms of these things, but they need to fish out the traitors within their own ranks.
Thank you, Tony, very much indeed. That's a good point, Charlie, isn't it? That the Met are not the ideal people to be doing this. If it works on paper, it's fine, but the Met might mess it up.
Well, that's why there has to be that scrutiny, and there has to be some sort of overarching, you know, group of, well, parliaments, politicians, to make sure that actually it's being used effectively. You know, in areas where there are there's a high concentration of either crime use, or where people know about it, where there are gangs, where police and intelligence and community policing knows where there's a high concentration of people that could be potentially carrying a knife, then that's where it's got to be used. It can't just be, as that Tony just said, used on anybody indiscriminately. It's got to be based on intelligence.
But what about the now proven levels of racism in the police force? How do you then send those officers out in the hope that they will be fair?
And that's why, as I said before, you've got to have the diverse workforce, you've got to have the people in the Metropolitan Police and all across the country. But the answer is not, even if that is obviously still a problem and needs to be rooted out, but the answer to that is not to then, I think, introduce, as we say, all of these arches everywhere that makes everybody feel alert, that makes us feel even more unsafe.
It might make us feel safer.
I don't think it will. I think it increases the fear.
I go to Chelsea every home game. There's 43,000 people in the stadium. They've now decided to do airport-style searches on the way in. And what it means, firstly, everyone gets cross. And what it means is that you've got now an enormous crowd outside the stadium, which is a target. And it's because
target of what?
Well, because clearly, if you keep 5,000 people waiting while you search everyone individually, that's the sort of place that makes people vulnerable. Ironically, getting them into the stadium without a weapon is different. But everything involves unintended consequences, doesn't it? That's the thing. So Alan is in Argyll and Bute. Alan, what do you think about this? Is there more searches, more stop and search?
I think you're absolutely right. I think more stop and search is vital. I think the police should have powers to do that, and it doesn't matter the demographic of the person that they're searching. I don't think we have as much of an issue potentially here. I stay in a small village. I've got 2 young daughters, and I'm quite petrified when they're in the cities now. But I agree with what was said on the panel around areas that show higher levels of violence, maybe higher levels of crime. I think these areas have to be the ones where the police have got the opportunity to go in.
But Alan, this incident happened in Huntingdon, which is not a high.
Well, hang on. It
sort of on the train.
Yeah.
But you know, these are not places with very high concentrations of minority communities. One never can tell where these things are going to happen.
Where some of the other, Peterborough is where some of the other instances.
Alan, I've got to just get a Richard in Buckinghamshire. Last call on this. Hello, Richard.
I think they should ramp up stop and search and do it like now to solve knife crime, because that's what it will do. Anybody who isn't bothered by it, we're all the people who say, well, you know, a normal person doesn't carry a knife, so we should. And if the police stop me, it's happened before, you just conform and you actually go with it and agree that, you know, the police stopping you had a crime that was reported, and that's why they're stopping you. It's very clear that they have to increase knife crime.
Decrease knife crime. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have a problem with being searched every day by the police. I don't know why. Is it a big issue?
So two things. It probably isn't for you and I, because but I think that's why there is the problem with obviously indiscriminate. But I would rather be a victim of stop and search wrongly rather than be a victim of knife crime. I think that's the problem. But I do think if you are wrongly stopped and searched, actually there could be some sort of recompense.
There are black men who have done very well in life, actors, politicians, who will tell you how many times.
Yes, I know. It's interesting.
How many times they were stopped.
And I'm very conscious.
It would turn me into a violent gangster,
I'm conscious
I must say.
We heard from Tony, but we haven't had that voice in the studio. So thank you very much indeed for talking about this. Thanks, Richard. Later, it's the papers and everything else, including...